What if there was a way for your thoughts, your words, to be sent into the future and to be understood and appreciated by someone anywhere on the planet? Would that not make us, in a way, immortal and give us the power to communicate across time and space? I'm Bella St. John. Join us as we venture together to explore the history of those words, the history of the novel in A Novel Idea.
I would like to welcome Professor Thomas Pavel. Welcome, sir.
So wonderful to talk about this topic, the development of the novel, which is something that interests me. I would say since I was a teenager, and I was reading Tom Jones by Fielding under the cover in order for my mother not to know that I didn't turn off the light. Okay.
Actually, it's funny with the intro that we have for A Novel Idea. There are a couple of photographs of little people reading under the covers with their flashlights, and I used to do exactly the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. This is the time when parents told you exactly what you have to do, yes. So you do something else. Yeah.
Precisely. So you wrote an amazing book that now I travel the world, and at the moment the book is actually traveling with me, called The Lives of the Novel. And actually, apart from my love of novels and history, it was actually your book that prompted this particular series. So
you are most too kind. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, it's true.
Yeah.
So could you please give me a little bit of a background on what prompted you to write this book in the first place? So what is it, what's it about, and what prompted you to write it?
In fact, I wrote it because I had to, being a professor at Princeton, they asked me to write to teach this course, the history of the novel, which was and teaching this course and reading this novel, at some point I understood certain special things about the history of the novel. And after teaching it for a few years, I said, I will just write a book. I will write a book because I had something to... The idea is that people should write books only when they feel they absolutely need to write them, okay? And this was the case with this history. I absolutely needed to put together certain things that I realized while teaching. And the students were very good, and it was a long course. This is why, yeah.
So essentially your book, I could give a rant about what your book's about, but over to you. So your book is about what?
My book is about the way, first of all, about the way the novel was developing at some point in a certain historical and cultural context. I wanted also to distinguish the novel from the old epics. The Iliad, the Odyssey, epics are something. And the novel appears later, and it's something quite different. It's quite different, and we can talk about it. I wanted to emphasize this. And I, together with other researchers who before me emphasized the ancient Greek novel, a genre which appeared in the 3rd century, 4th century, later in the Greek civilization. And we'll talk about that, and how this was incredibly successful later when it was rediscovered in the Renaissance. People suddenly, oh, wow, these books were written long ago, it's fantastic, and everybody read them, and then they were again forgotten in the 18th, 19th, and in the 19th century, 20th century. But this is how it started, and we can talk about that.
Please, yes. So for this first episode, we're talking about the biology of the novel. So it's origin. I mean, from your perspective, what's the genesis of the novel? So I'd like to just go to the Tale of Genji, which a lot of people say is the very first novel, and a lot of people wouldn't necessarily have heard of this.
Yeah. I mean, I must say that while looking at various histories of the novel written in various countries, usually each country wants to say, we were the first. And I'm from Romania, which started a little bit later. So in Romania, we don't say we are the first. We try to do good things, but not necessarily. So the idea of the first is wonderful, but not necessarily always so useful. And the Tale of the New is a great story. But what I would like to point out is the following. Many people and many scholars say that the novel continues the epic tradition, the Iliad, the Odyssey. It's not completely true. It's not completely. The Iliad, the Odyssey, and this kind of epic poems in other cultures also, in Northern Europe, they are based on oral literature. People forget that before writing, people still were talking and also reciting poetry and knowing by heart poetry. And the oral culture was incredibly alive everywhere in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in North and South America, because human beings need poetry even if they don't have writing. Okay, and the Iliad and the Odyssey are based on this oral tradition, and somebody, the legend says it's a poet named Homer, put together the Iliad, this kind of oral tradition, and they were poems, this kind of epic poem. There are poems about struggles between cities, a large number of heroes, fighters, characters, and so on. And it was in a very interesting way. The topic was the history of those cities.
Yes. But also that brings up a point that I wanted to get to in this first episode, which is, what is a novel? Because again, if we go back to the tale of Genji, I mean, that's it's not necessarily a novel from my perspective, in that it was a series of, it's beautifully crafted. It's psychological. It has drama. It's a beautifully crafted piece. But it looks like, and this is open for debate, as I know, that it's like it came to an abrupt end, and a number of people say, well, it's because it wasn't actually constructed as an entire entity. It was just being made up as she went along, and even then it was told verbally, as you're saying. And as with the Iliad and the Odyssey, they were also told verbally on the way through. And is that necessarily a novel? So to really give us the foundation here, I'd like to get your thoughts then on what is a novel, because the reason that I wanted to mention those books up front is that I'm not necessarily sure that they classify as a novel. But to say that, we need to define, well, what is a novel?
Right. We need to sort of reflect a little bit on this, because I must say that at my age, I am terrified by definitions, okay? Because you define and suddenly you realize there is another nuance, and there is another, and they are not completely exceptions. Yeah. It's like a family in which people resemble to each other, but not completely, okay? So the novel is a family of literary works, and let's put it this way. What you talked about is very, very important, namely the episodic nature. The episodic nature. We are used to the episodic nature because also people at that time, not only in some cultures they didn't have writing, but they did not have TV, if you can imagine such a thing. It was so strange. But in the world of TV, we are used to this episodes. They take years and years, okay? Long novels, these long novels, like the Genji one, or the one I will mention, the Ethiopian story by Heliodorus, the Ethiopian, is very, very important. They were very long. Their imitations in 16th, 17th century in Spain, France, England, Italy, everywhere the people who read it try to imitate. They are long novels. Some of them are 4, 5, 6, 10 volumes. People, not everybody knew how to write a diagram. The clergy knew how to write and read, but for instance, the nobility didn't. The nobility knew how to fight, and they met about once a week, and somebody read orally this novel. So it was just like we watching a TV series. So this is why they are so long, in order to keep the attention of the listener for a long time.
And I think there's an important point as well there. And coming back to the definitions, well, I'm actually with you in that. For me, and I was kind of baiting a little in that. For me, it really just comes down to it's a story. It doesn't matter if it's somebody that's spoken it. It doesn't matter if somebody's speaking it around a campfire and it goes on, and somebody else has written it down and then published it. It comes down to the essence is that it's a story. But one of the other things that I found fascinating as I was doing research for this was looking at the more well-known, shall we say, books, quote unquote novels along the way. They're almost all episodic in nature, or they're epistolary, so they're told through letters or journals, or they were series like H.G. Wells' Time Machine, etc. I found that fascinating. That when I looked at the ones that were more popular, that people even now would recognize the names of, but even in their time were extraordinarily popular. It comes back to this episodic nature. And so I think that's something that we'll touch upon as well as we go through the next episodes.
Right, absolutely. And let me add something. This is very, very important because, in fact, those there were some novellas, not novels. There were the novellas, which are much shorter in Italy. Boccaccio, for instance, these were short. They initially were 10 pages, 20 pages. Cervantes wrote a few which were 40 pages, but they had a unity of action. And this is why they were excellent for the playwriters who needed topics for their plays. For instance, Shakespeare, many of Shakespeare's plays and his contemporaries were just staging Italian novellas. Othello is based on one of the Romeo and Juliet, because they have unity of action. And the original one was 10 pages, 12 pages. The novels proper were much, much longer and episodic. Okay. Yeah. But I would add for a kind of a characterization or reflection, the novels are not as much about a city as they are about an individual.
Yes.
Or even more than an individual, originally about a couple. How you can form a couple. And this is why love novels were so important for a long time. And these people, this individual and this couple are not completely determined by the world. They are not completely obeying their families. They are not completely obeying their city. And they discover who they are and who their city or parents are in the novel. So it is people who are, each of us is a little bit like that, I would say. Each of us is a little bit outside, not completely in the world. And some of us pay a huge amount of money to psychologists to tell us exactly who we are, but it could be equally interesting, a bit less expensive, to just read a few novels. Okay, I'm joking. So at some point.
It is. I mean, if you can, I can absorb myself into a book and learn not only so much about what's in the book, but if I take the time and the effort and the energy and the love to reflect upon what the book is teaching me about myself.
Right. Yeah. Oh, wow. This is like, I am like that.
Tell me about the Ethiopian story.
The Ethiopian story was written in the 3rd, 4th century. We don't know by whom. The author signs as Heliodorus, and it is a deeply Neoplatonic novel. It's about a couple, Theagenes and Chariclea, who at Delphi, at the games, they discover suddenly that they love each other. It's a love at first sight coming from above. There is a kind of always a sun god. It's not even mentioned, but in each nation through which they go, there is a priest of the sun that guides them. And Chariclea is the daughter of a Greek merchant, and their family wants to marry her to somebody, the kind of arranged marriages, the traditional ones. But once she sees Theagenes, she realizes she doesn't want. And there is a priest of the sun from Greece, if I remember well, from Egypt, who tells them, I will guide you, let's run away. And they run away, and they go through Egypt. They are kidnapped by pirates. They go through these serial adventures, one after the other, always at the end saving their lives. Both Theagenes is very strong, and she is very, very strong, okay? And in the end, they reach Ethiopia. And she realizes, I don't want to go into all this, that she is the daughter of the queen of Ethiopia. Why she's not there? Because in Ethiopia, people have a darker skin. And she was born whitish. So her mother was afraid that her husband, the king, would think that that his wife was not faithful to him. So this is when she gave it to this Greek merchant to take her away. Okay, so and she comes back and discovers that the mother is so happy. She tells her husband, who completely understands the situation. I don't want to go into why this happened, but there is just one problem: is that Theagenes, who is there, doesn't have the right to be in Ethiopia. This is the old style in which if you get into a country without being approved, you were killed. He has to be sacrificed to the god. And the king says, I cannot change the law. I'm the king, but and there is an alliance because people start to like Theagenes very much, the population and the people. And the priests implore the king to change the law. And he would be, although he's a Greek, he will be an Ethiopian. So it is about a world which is a one world, and where the color of your skin doesn't count. And it is just human beings have a certain kind of independence from the world. I wouldn't want to use the very strong term autonomy. It's just a certain independence. But on the other hand, this whole world becomes hospitable. It's very, very moving. And as I said, in the Renaissance, it had a huge success. I even saw one of the first copies of its Latin translation. It was brought from Constantinople at the end of the 15th century, when Constantinople became the capital of the Ottoman Empire, and lots of people left and took manuscripts with them, including this one. And it was brought to the Hungarian kingdom at that time, translated into Latin first. And I saw the old Latin translation in Rome. It was very moving, yeah. And it was translated immediately in French, Spanish, English, in all European languages, and imitated a lot, yeah.
And so from your perspective, what makes that a foundational novel?
Because it targets in a very interesting way what it means to be an individual. What it means. What, am I an individual? Am I part of a crowd? What am I?
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that if we had to come up with a definition of a novel, I think perhaps if we just go that it is a story about what it means to be human.
Yeah.
Or even if even if it's written about robots or whatever, it's a story about consciousness, about what it means to love and to be, and so
about this kind of human awareness, which I find each of us find it within ourselves.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, so that's a perfect point to finish up this particular episode. We'll be back with the next episode when we're looking at chivalry. Chivalry is dead, or is it?